I always like being the last speaker of the day because you only have two kinds of people left. They're either the really committed ones or the ones who dozed off a few hours ago and are just now waiting for the end of the thing to happen. So either way, there's no pressure on me. I'll be brief, and I just wanted to close out today with some thoughts about the 3 technologies that can kill or give life to a business. I guess initially the title of my presentation was the 3 technologies that could kill or give life to people, but that seemed kind of morbid, so I decided to make it for business. I'll start with a story. Circa 1979 is where my story starts, and I was a 3rd-year college student in the U.S. I won't tell you which one I am in the picture. You can guess. Those were simpler times. That was when my main concern in life was how wide my collar should be, and nothing else. But I was a 3rd-year electrical engineering student at the University of Washington, and I found that I had to quit school because my wife was pregnant with our first child. And so I had to quit school and not finish my degree. But fortunately for me, before I left school, there was a job fair at the UW. And in that job fair, I walked in, all these companies were recruiting students, and in the corner I saw this one booth that said, wanted support engineers, no degree required. And so that's for me. I don't have a degree, I'm going to apply for that, and fortunately, I got the job. It was for support engineer for a little-known computer known as the Lisa back then, and I ended up working for this guy. And Steve Jobs had a really interesting vision back then. His vision was to put a computer in every home. And when you think about it today, what's the big deal about that? Well, this is 1979. When you say computer, you didn't think laptop or desktop. When you said computer, you thought mainframe. And back then, a mainframe was about the size of a bus. So it was a kind of a wild dream, because who would want to put something as big as a bus inside your living room? So it was a wild dream, but it became a reality, and as a result, it became very successful, very powerful, very wealthy. And he built his whole empire on the idea that computers or hardware was the way to the future. Now, when I was at Apple, I didn't do a lot of work on hardware, but I spent a lot of my time working on this product. Excel came out in the Macintosh before it came out on Windows. And I was one of the first 500 people in the world to actually get my hands on Excel and start using it. I learned how to program on Excel. It was a wonderful experience. All we worried about back then was how we can do rows and columns of numbers to add up properly and not take 12 hours, which is how long it took for a mainframe to do a 5-year projection at that time, to recalculate the numbers. And later on, because of my fascination with this, I ended up working on the same team that worked on the Windows version of Excel. And that was my introduction to the world of software. I've been in the software industry since. The biggest advantage, I guess, of working on this project was that at that time, the man who was responsible for the program management of Excel for Windows was this guy, and he ended up becoming my boss. And Bill had a slightly different vision than Steve did. Bill's vision was to put a computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software. So obviously he had a different, more detailed vision. And because that vision became a reality, he also became very successful and very powerful. And today, basically every computing device runs some kind of Microsoft software. Okay, everything, even Apple devices run Microsoft software. So Bill's vision was built on software, and Steve was built on hardware. And I think, from my experiences today, what is driving technology forward is the software part. Okay, although what makes software possible is the hardware, the real intelligence, the real advantages that come in technologies because of what software can do. Okay, so that's kind of my background, my story. Oops, I just killed it. There you go, okay. So, as businesses, we go through a lot of disruptive forces. And there's really only 3 major things that disrupt business. The first, of course, is regulatory changes. Government forces change on us because they change the rules on us. Second is cultural evolution. Like today, the age of the millennials, it forces changes in our business because millennials are different than the baby boomers like me and the Gen X and Gen Y. They're different. So cultural differences require us to change our business practice. And of course, technology is one of the biggest drivers of disruption. And speaking of disruption, we've been through, boy, that slide looks terrible. They don't have the fonts that I put in my slides. So anyway, we've been through several technology disruptions throughout history, all the way to the 1700s to globalization in the 1980s. But in 1995, we had a significant disruption. And there was an important event that happened in 1995, other than the release of Windows in 1995. What was that event? Anybody guess? What happened in 95? The beginning of the internet revolution. What happened in 1995 to start it all? Ever hear of a product called Netscape Navigator? The first browser was introduced in 1995. And the reason why that's so revolutionary is that for the first time, the internet became accessible to normal human beings. Before that, you had to be a geek like me to access the internet. It was called DARPANET back then. But now, with the browser, information at your fingertips became a possibility for normal human beings, and not just for engineers and geeks like me. Now, we've had another significant revolution start in 2012, and this is called the digital disruption revolution. So 7 years ago, approximately, 6 years ago, this revolution started. And basically, the digital disruption revolution started because now the lines between digital and physical are blurring. And what caused those lines to blur? Well, in 2012, this happened. It's an acronym, SMAC. And SMAC stands for these four technologies. And again, these technologies, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, existed way before 2012. But what specifically happened in 2012 that made it blow up? Well, it became accessible to normal human beings. In 2012, these four technologies became ubiquitous, became commonplace. People were using cloud, analytics, even before they knew what it was. So it became accessible to normal human beings. And that's why it blew up. And now we're living in the age of SMAC. So I'd like to take that maybe a step further and talk about what has SMAC spawned, because it's now been 6 years. Where are we now in terms of the technologies that were spawned by this latest revolution? And that's what I want to spend the last few minutes talking about, and the impact this has on our daily lives and our businesses. So SMAC has spawned three major technological innovations. The first is we've talked about all day is AI, of course, artificial intelligence. The second is robots. And the third is CS. And if you don't know what CS is, you'll know by the end of my talk. So AI, robots, and CS. Let's talk about that individually. So artificial intelligence has been talked about all day. You're all familiar with what it is, but let me give you my definition of AI. AI is when machines are able to do things that previously only the human brain could do. Okay, so you have something that looks kind of like this.
Hi, Sophia. How are you?
Hi there. Everything is going extremely well.
Do you like talking with me?
Yes, talking to people is my primary function.
Okay, so we look at sort of the anthropomorphic version of AI, and we see Sophia. Okay, but I want to bring you inside AI and what makes AI actually possible. Okay, this is you can't read that, but this is a scanned image of a Time magazine article back in 2011 when they still actually printed the Time magazine. I couldn't find a digital version, so forgive me for the quality, but this curve shows you the progress of computing power expressed as the number of calculations per second for every $1,000. So you start back here, back in the 1900s, okay, over there with the analytical engine by Charles Babbage, the very first computer, Obviously very low because it costs a lot of money and couldn't do very much. It was basically a calculator. All the way to 1979, where my story started. In 1979, there was a computer called the Apple II. The Apple II cost $1,300. And it was the first mass-produced computer. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people had an Apple II. So computers became commonplace. And then whether you know it or not, in 2000, something very important happened. The Power Mac G4 was released. The Power Mac G4 was the first computer that could do 1 billion floating point calculations. Okay, I'll give you a reason why that's significant. 1 billion floating point calculations. And that was in 2000, which is now a long time ago. To try to connect this to what the human brain does, the human brain has about 100 billion neurons. And when you think about a neuron, it's really nothing more than a switch. In electronic terms, a neuron is like a transistor. And as you know, every chip now, like an Intel Pentium or i7 chip, is really composed of millions of transistors in it. Much smaller than they were in my time, but they still transistors. So if you look at an iPhone, for example, an iPhone has 3.3 billion transistors, an iPhone, okay? So it's still it's still a far cry from the 100 billion neurons that the human brain has. But you have to extrapolate. An iPhone is what we have today. But by 2023, the number of transistors on a single chip, which you can buy for $1,000, will in fact hit 100 billion transistors. So theoretically speaking, by 2023, one computer you can buy for $1,000 will actually be able to have as many switching capabilities as the human brain. But let me take that, and yeah, that's why I like digital things better than physical. They don't come apart. Okay. Let me take that one step further. If you take it all the way to 2045, the projection is that in one computer that you can buy for $1,000, you will have as many switches or transistors in it as the entire of humankind. All the brains in the world, each one having 100 billion neurons, multiplied by the number of people, that's what you're going to find in one chip. This is what's driving the capabilities of AI. If you have that much computing power on a single chip, the possibilities are endless. So we like to look at this AI stuff and think of it in terms of how does it now get embedded into physical things. And when you think about physical things, you think about robots, right? You have robotic animals, you have drones, you have self-driving cars, or even factory robots. You think of the robots that you have as nothing more than the physical manifestation of AI, but these are very simple robots, if you ask me. These are very basic stuff. And it can't get any more basic than putting AI in a robot that does very mundane, shall we say, blue-collar work, something like this.
Meet Amazon's newest holiday workers, the Kiva robots. At this fulfillment center in Tracy, California, more than 3,000 of them cruise the warehouse floor, helping employees fill millions of orders.
Okay, so that replaces factory workers. In one factory alone, in one warehouse alone, it has replaced 3,000 factory workers. But that's not all. It replaced 3,000 factory workers, but these guys never take a break. They work 24/7, and they very rarely make mistakes. So in fact, the cumulative effect of having 3,000 Kiva robots that you saw there earlier is the same as having 10,000 employees working in that location. So it's an order of magnitude. So that's the physical part. Okay, that's the physical part of AI when you see robots. But there's also the digital part of AI, which probably for the BPM industry is going to have a bigger impact than robots that move things around in a warehouse. And here's what I'm talking about. so the star of that video was not the little red guy. Okay, that was just a cartoon. I wasn't really trying to say that we're gonna all have little 6-inch robots that stop doing our work for us. That was just kind of a cartoon of what really was happening, and that is that there was a robot, a digital robot, inside the computer, writing and doing data entry for that woman. Now, I've seen this thing go full circle. I was there at the time when we created Excel so that human beings could use it to do numerical analysis. I'm now at a point in my career where we're creating digital robots to actually do data entry in Excel. Well, think about that. We used to only replace computers or mechanical devices. Now we're replacing human beings with these robots. CS is the last thing I want to talk about. CS stands for Cognitive Services. So other than putting intelligence in robots, what AI can now do is mimic what humans could only do. And CS, basically, Cognitive Services, is about computers, AI, being able to detect things that normally only humans can detect. Okay, so some examples of that. How about detecting the way somebody feels? Facial recognition now allows us not only to identify people based on your face, it now allows us to detect how that person's feeling using their expressions and micro-expressions, like this. Okay. So we actually have a working application that a customer is using right now. It's kind of cool. I wish I could have demoed it today, but basically it's called Crowd Sentiments. So if we had a bag of cameras up here, I could have taken a picture of this whole crowd and told you what percentage of you were actually paying attention. Because all you have to do is find out who is looking at their phone, right? If their heads are down like this, then you know they're not paying attention. So I can give you a percent, I give you a pie chart, 55% were paying attention, 40% were not paying attention, and there were 3 people sleeping in this crowd. So we are now able to talk about the emotional state because computers can actually see that through our face. But from a more business standpoint, if we can detect, if AI can detect, not just identify people or their emotions, but the objects around them, what does that mean? It means now it can observe and make decisions like a human being would do. So the next video I'm going to show you has to do with AI being used to enforce compliance. And compliance can be something as simple as attendance, which I think we're already doing. You know, facial recognition can be used for attendance, but this is compliance of a policy. This particular video shows a company that has a policy that only certain authorized people can operate certain pieces of equipment. And when somebody who's not authorized or certified tries to operate the equipment, he will send an alert to the manager. So here's how it looks.
Only credentialed employees can use their cameras. Okay, the new policy has been activated, and so now she can just go about her job, and I won't get any policy violations, which means our regulations are being met. Now, if somebody who's not authorized to use that equipment comes onto the construction yard, a workflow is going to notify me and people nearby of a potentially dangerous situation. Like that one, for example. You can see the violation's been triggered, and Christine is able to quickly resolve it.
Okay, so you see there, on the right there, is actually a message that went up on Messenger. It says, there's been a policy violation. We have an unauthorized person trying to operate a jackhammer. That was all done without any human intervention, just cameras and AI, making that using cognitive services, which in my mind right now is probably the most useful use of AI in business today, is cognitive services. And we actually have quite a few projects going on right now with local companies using cognitive services to do what we call observational analysis. We can observe how employees behave, we can observe how customers behave, and based on that, we can make certain decisions. Okay, so that's CS. So now you know what CS is. It's not client server, it is cognitive services. So I'll end with this, a few takeaways from the technology world. First, AI is no longer about just thinking. AI is also about seeing, hearing, and feeling what previously only human beings could detect. So it's now a sensory type of technology. Second, when we say object-oriented programming, some of you are techies, so you know what that is. You know, object-oriented programming is no longer just applied to programs in the digital world. Objects can be robots that are physical, they can be digital objects as well. In 5 years, in 2023, Singularity version 1 is going to happen. One computer, one chip, will have the processing capability of a human brain. That's 2023. I think I'll still be alive. Most of us will still be alive at that time. But in 27 years, Singularity 2.0 will happen. And maybe by then Skynet will be born. I don't know. I may not be around anymore. That's quite a few years from now, but most of you probably will. And that's when a single computer will have the same processing power as all the human brains in the world combined on one computer that you can buy for $1,000. So I hope that gives you some food for thought, and I hope to have educated and entertained you a little bit in my short time here with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joey. That is interesting. That is very interesting. Okay, we'll have Joey, just maybe if you could grab a comfortable seat. And we just got time. I know everybody's looking pretty good though. We'll have time for a few questions. So we'll ask back up on the stage Joselle CQ, as well as Sean Mather to come on back up. And as well, we'll have a new panelist to the stage, Jazz Anand. Where is Jazz? Oh, there he is. Okay. And yeah, if you have questions, you can text them or get yourself ready to speak them. But everybody looks all right. There's a few stragglers, but they look pretty good. I gotta say, I know it's been a long day, a lot of information, but a lot of good information too. Okay.